John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, 1942 to 1994. You know, clowns can get away with murder. John Wayne Gacy. All the police are going to get me for is running a funeral parlor without a license. Another quote by John Wayne Gacy. Duplicity, thy name is Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was named for an American hero, and, like the rest of his vile life, that was a lie too. Heroic is the least likely word that might be used to describe the terrible deeds committed by Gacy. A pederast, child abuser, rapist, kidnapper, and murderer. John Wayne Gacy wore a mask, both literally, a clown, and figuratively, upstanding citizen, husband, and father. It seems the only thing he did not lie about was his crime. When finally captured, Gacy confessed to 33 murders and even led police to spots where he had dumped the bodies of some of his victims. Gacy was the son of an alcoholic abuser who treated his son, a junior, proudly named for his father, with contempt, hostility, rejection, and criticism. Gacy's father died while Gacy was in prison, and Gacy was emotionally distraught that they had never had a better relationship. Even though his father was hostile and abusive, Gacy still loved him and had hoped to resolve some issues between them at some point in his adult life. Unlike many other serial killers, John Wayne Gacy was never a loner, never someone who kept a low profile, and lived a secluded, quiet life. The kind of person that neighbors might have described as someone who kept to himself after his evil deeds were discovered. He was quite the contrary, actually. Gacy was active in the Boy Scouts as a youth, worked in a number of civic and charitable organizations throughout his adolescence and adult years, and was known in his community as a hardworking, affable fellow who was always ready to lend a hand or throw a party, many of which boasted a guest list comprised of some of the area's most respected political, business, and civic leaders. Little did they know. In Springfield, Illinois, Gacy met and married his first wife. Mary Lynn Myers was a membership chairman for the Chi-Rho Club, a member of the board of the Catholic Interclub Council. He was raised Catholic. A volunteer with the Illinois Federal Civil Defense, a commanding captain for the Chicago Civil Defense, an officer for the Holy Name Society, and vice president and man of the year of the local JCs. Later, when he lived in Chicago, he was a Democratic Party volunteer and, most disturbingly, entertained children at hospitals and parties dressed as the lovable Pogo the Clown. During the 7-year period from 1972 until his arrest in 1978, John Wayne Gacy kidnapped, drugged, raped, tortured, and killed 33 young men, and buried most of their bodies on the grounds beneath and around his own home. A few he threw in the river. Gacy's lack of remorse, combined with his confessions and the overwhelming evidence against him, made it easy for the jury. On March 11, 1980, he was found guilty of all 33 murders. 2 days later, he was sentenced to death. It would be another 14 years before the state of Illinois would carry out Gacy's sentence. On May 10, 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. In 1968, at the age of 24, Gacy was convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage boy and sentenced to 10 years in prison. A model prisoner, Gacy was released for good behavior in only 18 months. Gacy started over with financial help from his mother, and again, became the kind of model citizen many communities would love to have in their neighborhoods. Gacy started a painting and remodeling company, but had an ulterior motive. He planned to transform his young teenage workers, all boys, into his sex partners. Suspicions grew when many of the boys who worked for Gacy suddenly disappeared. Many of the young boys were ultimately found buried in the crawl space beneath Gacy's house. Ironically, many people who attended Gacy's parties often remarked about the foul stench permeating his house. One neighbor was certain a rat had died somewhere in his walls. Gacy simply nodded sympathetically when people complained about the smell and told them a story about mold and moisture problems. Eventually, the truth about Gacy and his deviant and murderous impulses surfaced, and the law took over. Gacy's defense attorneys tried an insanity defense, but there was too much conflicting evidence about just how intelligent Gacy actually was. One of his neighbors, called as a witness for the prosecution, called him a brilliant man.